We are coming to the end of a journey in the life of Abraham. We've spent almost 4 months on this Bible character. We have walked through his life. We have seen him at his highs, and we have seen him at the lows. One of the things that I think stands out when we often talk about Abraham is the idea that he, as a Bible character, we often put up on a pedestal as a man of faith. And that I think you have realized that in that journey for Abraham, it has really been a roller coaster of a ride to get there. And so we're going to look at that this morning. Okay, Taylor, is my clicker back there? Is it sitting back there somewhere? I have lost it. Oh, there we go. I need that magic weapon. I tried something new in Sunday school this morning using it, and I apparently took it back there. So we'll get that and get going here. We're in Genesis chapter 25. What's interesting is the last 3 chapters of Genesis actually cover lots and lots of space. So thank you. Yeah, really. So it cover a lot of space. Chapter 23 covered 20 years. We went 20 years between 23 and 24, 20 years between 24 and 25, and we're going to go like 50 years. So we take these big jumps now as we get to the end of his life. So we're at Genesis chapter 25 this morning. It's short, but it's going to kind of be a wrap up of some of the lessons that we've learned. So here's what it says. It says, first of all, it says that the passage right before talks about Abraham getting remarried and having 6 more kids, by the way. So he's got 8 kids by the time it's all said and done here. It says he left everything that he owned to Isaac. But while he was still living, he gave gifts to the sons of his concubines, that had been those other 6 from Keturah, and sent them away from his son Isaac to the land of the east. And then it says Abraham lived 175 years. And then Abraham breathed his last, and he died at a good old age, an old man full of years. And he was gathered to his people. His sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave of Machpelah near Mamre, the field of Ephron the Zophar the Hittite, the field that Abraham had bought from the Hittites. There Abraham was buried with his wife Sarah. After Abraham's death, God blessed his son Isaac, who then lived near Beer-lahai-roi. That is the ending for the life of Abraham. 175 years old, he finally passes away. He, in that course of time between Sarah dying, he ends up getting, some people say he remarried. Some people say that Keturah was a concubine. Whatever, he ends up with 6 more kids. All 8 of his children end up being significant nations come from all of them. He basically then, and I don't know how this played out with the whole family dynamics, but he leaves everything to Isaac. So I'm sure that was an interesting discussion there because he had considerable wealth at that point in his story. But Isaac and Ishmael get together to have him buried at the cave there at Machpelah in Mamre, where his wife is. So, where his wife was buried. So, basically, you then have him coming to the end of his life. And don't have time to look at it this morning, but there's an interesting phrase here in Genesis 25 that says he was gathered to his people. And that really is a reference to life outside of this world as well, where he's going to where his family is. And so, if you go on in chapter 25, it talks about Ishmael. He's going to be 137 when he dies. He's going to have 12 kids. You're going to see then Isaac, and you go into the story of the twins, Jacob and Esau. So as we come to this, I just kind of want to wrap up some things that I think are observations as we look at the whole life of Abraham as a big picture, and then a couple of stories from the New Testament regarding Abraham. The first one is this idea, is that one of the things that I think you have seen is this idea of a guy who has really struggled in his walk. with the Lord. You know, we get this concept of Abraham sometimes that, you know, we go to the story of Abraham and Isaac and sacrificing Isaac, but we ignore all of the other parts of the story. You know, him going to Egypt and lying about his wife because he was afraid God wouldn't take care of him. You see him doing it again later in his journey. You see this idea of a guy who struggles with trusting God, but yet, as we come to the end of his life, he's learned enough to be able to look at his son and say, if God's asked me to sacrifice Isaac, I'll sacrifice Isaac. You watch a guy who struggled at the beginning with this idea of, well, we're not having children, so maybe I need to go to Hagar, and Ishmael creates a problem in the family. You watch this guy who, this faith journey for Abraham has been up and down, up and down, up and down. And I think that should be encouraging to us, because so many times in the Christian life, what happens is we feel like, okay, we failed God, and since we failed God, we can't serve God. And this is a guy who, for 175 years, you have watched out of that time, almost 100 of it being a struggle. It's not until the end of his life that he starts really faithfully understanding what he needs to do and how he needs to do it. It is a journey to get to where he is. And I think sometimes we forget that. I think sometimes that as far as the whole thing of him, we forget that the journey is a part of your faith walk, if you will. Look, I don't know how you feel about traveling and stuff like that, okay? There are some people that they love the traveling part. You know, I have a friend who, when he travels, he stops at every one of the historical markers and reads it. And his thing is, he enjoys the journey, okay? I enjoy the destination, okay? When my wife and I are going somewhere, I want to get there, I want to camp, or not camp, but that means unpack my stuff next to the hot tub in wherever we're staying, all right? That's what that means. But I want to unpack our stuff and kind of just be there. So for me, it's about the destination. But really, the Christian life is about the journey. It is about the highs and the lows. It is about the whole thing that happens in the process of getting there. And sometimes we get stuck on the idea of, well, I think it ought to be here all the time, and I don't understand why I've got to go through the valley. It's okay. It's okay to not have, I hope one thing you learned from Abraham, it's okay to not have your whole act together. Here is a guy who does the highs and the lows. And you see the trusting God in one moment and then not trusting God in the next moment. And you see a guy making the same mistakes twice. It's the whole Christian walk thing is about all of that. And he's somebody that we consider, you're going to see this in a minute, he's somebody we consider a person of faith. In some cases, the pinnacle of faith. But it's about the journey. It's also about a guy who ultimately believes God. Listen to James. Listen to what James says. You foolish person. You want evidence that faith without deeds is useless? Was not our father Abraham considered righteous for what he did when he offered his son Isaac on the altar? You see that his faith and his actions were working together. And his faith was made complete by what he did. And the scripture was fulfilled that says, Abraham believed God, and it was credited to him as righteousness. I want you to pay attention to that last phrase. He was called God's friend. Now, remember what we've learned. Did he look like he was God's friend when he went into Egypt and looked at his wife and said, now look, you lie and you tell him you're my sister because I don't think God's really going to take care of us here, and they'll take my life. Is that the pinnacle of God's friend? Yes. Because you see, all of that taught him something so that when it came to the story of Isaac, he was able to look at God and say, you know what? You told me This was the son of promise. You told me this was the way that the nation was going to go forward. Now you're asking me to take his life. I will take his life, and I will trust you. And as we talked about, I genuinely think Abraham intended to take the life of Isaac, and he intended for God to raise him from the dead. Because when he leaves to go up to that mountain to make that sacrifice, he turns around and looks at the servants and says, you guys stay here. We will be coming back to you. There was a confidence in him that whatever God was going to do, God was going to bring him and Isaac back to meet these guys again. And this is what he says. He says, it's that kind of belief and that kind of confidence in God. Abraham had that kind of belief that God was going to do what God needed to do in his life. You really want to walk of faith? That's what it means. It means that when God says, whosoever believes on me will not perish, but have everlasting life, that's what I believe in. I believe it. I put my eternal destiny on those kinds of statements. He is the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but by him. I'm putting my eternal destiny on that statement. Whosoever will call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. I'm putting my eternal... God said that. I am putting my confidence and trust in that. That's what we're talking about. God said, you're going to have this son. I'm going to multiply your descendants like the sand of the sea. And Abraham looked at it and says, all right, you want me to take his life? I will, but you're going to have to do something super here. I believe God. And like he said, he believed God and it was counted to him for righteousness. And he was called the friend of God. Next passage, which you're probably very familiar with too, comes in, what happened? There we go. By faith, Abraham, when he was called to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he didn't know where he was going. By faith, he made his home in the promised land, like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs with him of the same promise. For he, notice this, he was looking forward to a city with foundations, whose architect and builder is God. He's talking about something eternal here. He's not talking about something stationary. And by faith, even Sarah, who was past childbearing age, was enabled to bear children because she considered him faithful who made the promise. And so from this one man, and he as good as dead, came descendants as numerous as the stars of the sky and countless as the sand on the seashore. Look, here's the thing about Abraham you've got to realize. When God said, leave, I want you to start walking, he started walking. He didn't know where he was going. He didn't know how this thing was going to end up. He was going to live in tents. But that's not why he followed God. He followed God because he was looking for something better, something more eternal. A city whose builder and maker was God. He was looking forward to that day that he was gathered together with his people. Because you see, one of the things that you see about his faith is this idea of he was going to obey God even though he didn't understand where he was supposed to go or when he was supposed to stop. He was just trusting God every step of the way. And it started all the way back in the beginning when he leaves for Ur of Chaldees, when he leaves Ur of Chaldees. I maintain there is something to be said for the idea of not knowing. Because honestly, I think if God magically laid everything out for you for the next 15 years, it would scare the life out of you. And you'd go, no way. It's a day by day, step by step, week by week, month by month, year by year thing. If God would have looked at me at 18 years old, when I knew at 18 I wanted to go into ministry, and said, okay, here's the way this is going to work out. You're going to marry a Southern girl. You're going to go to Virginia. You're going to teach in Christian school. Then you're going to go spend 3 years in camp work. And you're going to spend 6 years in Sioux City, Iowa. And then I'm going to put you out on a farm, on an acreage, And I'm going to have you, you're going to raise pigs, and you're going to do a cow, and you're going to do a little pygmy goat, and you're going to raise 100 chickens every season, and you're going to have 2 kids, and you're going to pastor a rural church with 50 people, and then you're going to go through a building program, and then you're going to do this, and then you're going to do, I would have looked at God at that point and said, I don't think so. I don't think so. I'm a city boy. I'm not a country person, okay? I think country people are silly for cutting that much grass. There's no way I'm going to do that, you know? There is no way I'm going to do that. I used to make fun of those people. 35 years ago, I was making fun of people who lived in the country. I what? I said, I don't understand it. Why don't you just blacktop your yard, paint it all green, call it good? That makes common sense. Now, why? It's been a journey. It's been, okay, God, if that's what you want, that's what we'll do. All right, God, you know, if we need to build another building, we'll build another building. We're going to trust you. All right, God, you want a group to go to Papua New Guinea and help a missionary? We'll go. You know, okay, God, you want us to go to Jamaica and help a group, you know, build a greenhouse and a house? Sure, we'll go. And all the way along the way, it has just been a step by step and learning and trusting God. And that's what you need to learn from Abraham. That's the Christian journey. It's not claim that mountain and everything's live up on top of it and just enjoy. No. It is part of the journey. And there have been great things about that journey, and there have been ugly things about that journey. There have been things that I would sign up for in a heartbeat again, and there's things that I don't think you could give me enough money to sign up for again. But if it's what God wants, it's what God wants. And it's going to all be part of it. That's what I see. I see a guy who obeyed God. I see a guy who followed God. I see a guy who believed in God. I see a guy who, when he made a mistake, he tried to learn from it. Sometimes he'd make the mistake again, and he'd learn from it again, and eventually he gets to the point that God asks the ultimate of him, and he says, okay. And we look at him as a hero of the faith. I tried to think of a way to close this series that would be memorable for you, okay? So I wanted kind of a modern day way to connect the dots for you on the life of Abraham. And so most of the people that I came up with, I was having a generational problem. The old generation would understand it, the new generation wouldn't, the new generation would understand it, the old generation wouldn't. So I had to find a person who fit in the middle, and I think I found him. So I want to end this thing by saying this. You need to know what you want written on your tombstone. In fact, I would suggest this morning that if you don't know what you want written on your tombstone, you're not ready to live life. Because ultimately you need to know what you want written. Because that will decide then how you live your life. When I do a funeral and I put together a eulogy for somebody and I sit down with the family and I ask a question, the first question I ask is always the same. And here's the question. Give me one adjective that would describe this person's life. Sometimes they give me 2 words. Tell me what that adjective is for your life. Tell me what sums up your life. Because often when you're at a tombstone, you're paying by the letter. So you can't write a paragraph. You put on a couple of key words to sum up somebody's life on a tombstone or on a marker. Here's my question for you this morning. What words do you want on yours? Because when you can answer that, I think you know then how to make decisions in your life. So I found a guy. So what I did was this past week, I started looking at tombstones of famous people. Okay? And here's the guy I want to wrap this thing up with. Leonard Nimoy. Now, everybody in here knows who this is. That's why it was hard to find somebody that everybody would know. Little kids, everybody knows who this guy is. Okay? Here's what you should know about him. First of all, his parents were from Ukraine. They were actually Jewish immigrants. So he was raised devoutly Jewish. He was passionate about Jewish causes. He went to acting school. In order to pay for acting school, he sold vacuum cleaners in order to pay for acting school. Then he realized that, you know what, I really don't need acting school. They're not telling me a whole bunch of stuff I don't already know, because he had been acting, by the way, since he was 8 years old. So he decided to forego acting school. He actually ended up with an earned master's degree and 2 honorary doctorates. One of the things that you probably may know about him is you know him from the Star Trek series. Okay? He played the character Spock for almost 50 years. He died at 83, by the way, of COPD. But what's unique about him is that he played that character and he realized that his specialty was not being the lead character, but rather being a supporting character. So that's why he enjoyed the role of Spock so much, because it wasn't the lead character for Star Trek. He was supporting Captain Kirk, William Shatner. And they became lifelong friends. 50 years of over 50 years of friendship. He spent a lot of time on stage and theater. In fact, he played over 50 different characters in theater and stage. After the Star Trek thing, he did a lot of theater. He actually ended up getting 3 Emmy nominations for his role of Spock in Star Trek. He is the only Star Trek character to receive any Emmy nominations. And he received 3 of them. He has a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Here's what you probably don't know about him. He was actually a producer and director as well. He did a number of voiceovers, whether it be on everything from cartoon characters to series, educational series, even down to some video games that he actually did voices for, as well as cartoons. He actually was also a singer. He actually was one of the voices for one of the songs that actually made it to one of the top 10 songs in one of the categories or in the country. He was a writer. He wrote 2 autobiographies. The first one was called I Am Not Spock. The second one was called I Am Spock. He really struggled sometimes with that identity. Actually ended up becoming, during the Star Trek series, alcoholic. So he realized the danger of that. He became a recovering alcoholic. Then actually started helping other people get out of alcoholism. He also was a very accomplished photographer. In fact, when he got done with the Star Trek series, he considered a second career in photography. He actually had shows where they would display his photograph. And so there's all of these other sides to him. So here's a question for you now. So when he puts up a marker for his tombstone, what do you think he's going to put on it? He's been an actor for most of his life. You know, I thought he would do, like Mel Blanc, the guy who did all of the voices, you know, for the cartoons. You know what his says? That's all, folks. You know, so I mean, you know, I thought, okay, you know, it's Spock, live long and prosper. I mean, that's what you put on your tombstone, right? Right? I'm going to show you his tombstone. Because this is the one, out of all the ones I looked at, this is the one that hit me the most, okay? Here it is. Beloved husband, father, poppy, great-grandfather, and friend. There's that little symbol of his, you know, thing that he did for Live Long and Prosper deal on there. But short of that, you never even know he was an actor. or a photographer, or, you know what was important? Those things right there. I don't know if you're aware, oh, by the way, he did serve in the military. He ended up as a staff sergeant with the Army. Being Jewish, you see the stones, which is common for Jewish people to leave at a cemetery. What's significant to me are the quarters. It's primarily a military thing, but it's also it's becoming more and more common. First of all, from his Jewish world, let me tell you why they leave stones instead of flowers. They leave stones instead of flowers because stones have more permanence. Because stones are representative of something that was solid and something that's hard and something that has outlasts. So there's an eternal kind of connection to it. That's why it's significant in the Schindler's List that everybody leaves stones and the last person leaves a flower. Flower is representative of that which is living, and stones are representative of that which has gone and will continue to endure. There's a lot of interesting things about coins. It's predominantly a military thing. If you go to Arlington National Cemetery, you'll often see coins on the headstone. In a military world, if somebody's left a penny, it means that I didn't necessarily know you, but I'm honoring your service, and so they'll leave a penny on the headstone. If they leave a nickel, it means that I was in basic training with you. If they leave a dime, it's significant in that I served with you somewhere. If they leave a quarter, it means that I was with you when you passed. That has transferred over into the civilian world as well. So I think it's significant that at this particular picture, there's 6 quarters. 6 people who were with him when they passed, may or may not have been military associated or not. A lot of people now are starting to do this. So I think that speaks well. There were about 300 people in attendance for his funeral, of family and friends, close family and friends. What do you want to be known for? Live long and prosper? His poetry? No. His photography? No. His phenomenal acting career? No. Husband? Father? By the way, his kids, 2 of his kids, they did, I think he only had 2. Both of them have done honor tribute movie things about his life. Poppy, what his grandkids called him. Great-grandfather and friend. Most of his co-workers in the Star Trek series wrote tributes about him because his focus in life was always being a secondary supporting character rather than being the head character. This is what was important to him. So here's my question. Somebody's going to stand up and do a eulogy at some point or talk about your life. You're going to take, in his case, 83 years and bring it down into a short amount of time. Normally when I do a eulogy, it's about 5 minutes. I'm going to take your life and sum it up in 5 minutes. Somebody's going to have to decide what we put on your tombstone. They're going to have to go and pick adjectives to describe what your life was all about. What do you want them to say? If we were to write and put up a tombstone today for Abraham, here's what it would say. Friend of God. Friend of God. What's yours going to say? I close with this idea. I hope and pray that we can learn to model the healthy things that we've seen in the life of Abraham. Walk with God. Be considered a friend of God. Experience a full life of following God through the valleys as well as the mountaintops. And I hope you will be able to look back one day and see how God has worked in your life and used you. Know what you want those words to say. Because someday, somebody is going to have to probably try to come up with those words. I think you're ready to live when you know what those words are. Let's pray. Lord, help us. Thanks for the example of somebody who was a friend of God. Somebody who modeled faith, Lord, through the good times and the bad. Somebody who always came back to follow you no matter what. And Lord, help us as we go throughout this day, as we go throughout this week, that, Lord, we would honor you in all we say and all we do and the way we live our lives. And may you encourage our hearts this day. And we'll give you the honor and the glory and the praise, these things we ask in your name.